Hey gang, it's Todd Nauck, and it's time for part two of this Rose Tyler portrait. Doing a watercolor piece now, so picking up where we left off last time with a line art, just erasing the pencil lines, and now this illustration is good to go. So Rose Tyler is a character from Doctor Who. If you haven't tuned into Doctor Who yet, you don't know what you're missing. If you have the Netflix, go give that a look. So what I'm using here is a Windsor Newton travel set, and I've already started to mix my flesh tone. And essentially my flesh tone is red with a little bit of yellow and some white, and then a lot of water. And I do a kind of a test on a separate piece of paper to find the right shade of flesh tone that I'm looking for that particular person's skin tone. So I will test that out before committing to putting it down onto the actual artwork. Now, similarly to my Copic color illustrations, is I want to leave white of the artboard as a highlight, and I consider the different planes of the face. So the jawline, the nose, the bridge of the nose, the eyelid, the forehead. These are all different planes, different angles that I'm considering, and I want to sculpt the color in and work in different shades depending on where the light is coming from. Now, I personally find watercolor to be more challenging than Copic markers because with watercolor, that water and the paint is going to move and dry the way it wants to. And much like as I mentioned on my Ultron sketch wash video where I was moving the graphite of the pencil around with the water, same with watercolor. It's an exercise in learning how to not overwork an illustration. And I can easily do that. There are watercolor illustrations you guys will never see because in my practice I'm learning I'm overworking it. I use too much paint. I tried to control the water in the paint too much or the way it would dry, and when I tried to exert that control, it just became a muddy mess, and so I had to scrap it. So a lot of this right here is coming from just lots of practice. You got to get in there, practice, and expect to make mistakes. In fact, sometimes it's good just to do a quick sketch that you can just practice your watercoloring over just so you can learn the shapes and not invest a lot of time in doing some sweet line art and then screw it up with the watercolor paints. So you got to be prepared to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So one of the lessons I've been learning here more recently is to let less be more. Less is more. So I try not to overwork the skin tones and sculpting of the face with the paint um, too much. So just coming in with a basic flesh tone, coming in with a little bit of rose for the cheeks and for the nose, maybe a little bit of shading for the eye and things like that. And letting that be it, and letting the color and the water dry as it does and see what forms before trying to go in and add another color on top of that. So here I'm working in a light shading color, which is pretty much taking a little bit of brown and a little shade of blue into my flesh tone I've created to create just a little bit of a darker shade that works for some of the more shadowy areas, like the eyelids here, underneath the chin, a little bit in the ears, maybe just under the lip, and underneath the bottom of the nose there. And just a little bit. Just get in, add a few little shadow parts, and then hop out. Don't overwork it, is what I'm trying to tell myself as I'm approaching my personal watercolors here. A little bit of shadowing behind this one cut of hair, and really trying to keep it simple. All right, so I clean off. I'm using a Kuretake water brush. A lot of you have asked what kind of brush I use in my different social networks where I'm posting photos of my the watercolors I've been working on. And a Kuretake water brush is a brush pen that has water filled up inside. And then as I squeeze at the end of the pen, the water will come down a reservoir into the bristles of the brush. So it's nice. So I'm not dipping my brush into a cup of water, and this makes it really nice to do watercolors while traveling. Because I'm not having to have a risk having a cup of water spilling over, especially at conventions. You don't want open cups of liquid in your art area because there's all sorts of sketches and prints and original art, and that can just be really dangerous. So a water brush pen really fits the bill. So now I pulled up the same photo reference that I used to pencil and ink this illustration to look at for the colors. So looking at the photo of Rose Tyler, which is up on my iPad out of shot of this video. Um, I'm looking at the shade of her hair and then trying to match that with the colors that I'm mixing. So starting off with the blonde, I'm doing some yellow with a lot of white in there to start off with a really, really light yellow as a base. Then I add a little brown to that same shade of yellow to darken it up a little bit. And now I'm cutting in the shadows as I see it in the photo. Then I'm trying to put the mirror those shadows in the sections of her hair, little bit by little bit. So just a little bit of brown, um, just lightly to kind of get a first pass at the shadows. So once I get that in, I want to darken this up a little bit more. So I add a little more brown. I'm adding a little bit of blue here. When these colors mix together, it kind of creates a nice kind of grayish shade of brown to get some of those little harder cuts of the shadow. Again, mirroring what I see in the photo, and it makes it look like blonde hair in that we see in real life, as opposed to just taking a big swatch of yellow and just slapping it down on her hair, because her blonde hair really isn't bright big bird yellow. It's shades of well, in a sense, a very light yellow, but also a lot of browns in there as well, and especially in the deeper shadowy areas. So I'm slowly cutting that in there bit by bit. All right, so now her jacket is gray. She wears a gray jacket in that episode of Doctor Who that I'm drawing from. So since I don't have gray or black in my travel set, I have to make gray. So I'm using a dark brown, kind of a darkish blue, some white. I do a little test. Let's see if it's a shade that I like, and if not, then I come in and I grab a little bit more of the brighter blue, working in just those four colors to kind of get that shade that I want, and then come in and start to cut the paint into the jacket to create the planes of the wrinkles and the folds of the cloth. Now, when the paint is fully laden in the brush, I start on the side where there's the shadow and start to work towards the side where there is light. So as the paint starts to run out of potency in the brush, it's getting lighter to where there is light. So I'm creating a natural gradation of dark to light just by the paint running out of the brush before I have to go back to my palette to refill. So that's another thing I consider as I'm approaching where to put my color. All right, so then just cutting in with a little bit of the light gray to break up the dark gray and the white highlight, and now I'm starting to move into the finer details of this illustration. So we add a little pink for the earrings, clean off my brush, add a little bit of the gray there for the chain that connects to the little dangly parts of the earrings there, and now it's time to create a color for the eyes. So the actress who plays Rose Tyler kind of has kind of the mostly green eye, but there's a little bit of brown in there too from the photo reference I was finding. So I want to try to mirror that in my color choices as well. So getting some more water there into my palette. Sorry that my hand is in the way. So get a little more water into that brown, drop a little kind of olive green in there, and start to create my own shade of green. Um, so putting that base um, green, brownish green in, and then creating a little bit of a darker shade of brown to cut in on the sides here of her pupils to give it a little depth of color. So now I'm taking a little bit of brown and red here into the pink that I created for Rose's lips. I'm creating a little bit of a shadow color that I can use to put a little depth in her lips. Now the pink that I used on her lips has dried, so I feel pretty safe to come in and add a little bit of shadow there, just a little bit. So now it's time to do a background wash. So I wanted to do a blue background, a nice blue, bright blue background that is the same color as the TARDIS, which is the police phone box that Doctor Who travels in. So I'm using a lot of the bright blue, a little bit of the darker blue, and then a lot of water. I need a lot of water on there. Do a little test, and now I'm just going to cut in to kind of do a kind of a little bit of a background wash to a degree. So I'm just kind of schmoozing it in, being careful how I butt up the background to the line art, and keeping it kind of wet, putting a nice big blob of water right on there so that it starts to really move the paint around. I've been learning more about doing washes here, and some of my future watercolor videos I'll have show you some of the things I've been learning. And you can find a lot of great watercolor tutorials here on YouTube, especially when it comes to doing a background wash. That's actually how I learned to do a background wash. Was I just did a search for background wash, watercolor background wash on YouTube, and found some cool videos that taught me some really cool tricks. So and I'll show you kind of some of the things I've learned, but you know, you can learn them straight from the source as well. So take full advantage of all the great tutorials here on YouTube. So adding a little more water there, and just working the paint and letting it dry and letting it pool as it wants to, and just dabbing in a little blue there so it creates this textured background. So then I come in with a little paper towel here and just do some light dabbing, kind of pulls up the water in the paint and creates some lighter areas in the background. Then cutting back in with my water brush with some paint and water to add some more darker spots that can pool and dry in new ways. Then do another dab, do another paint application, and so it's just a little bit of back and forth like that. Totally experimenting here, but working off of my past experiences, the things I've learned. I'm just trying to experiment here to create a textured background just with this one single, for the most part, single color, but very cautiously experimenting with dabbing and adding water and paint. All right, so now I'm just working up just a little bit of a darker brownish green. I want to add a few more details to different parts here on Rose. And first up is the eyes. I do a little test here, get the right shade of darker green, brownish green that I want. Just want to add a little bit more here to the two sides of her pupil here to create a little more contrast with the light and dark there. It just gives a little bit more for our eye to play with when we look at her eyes there. So just seeing those more drastic contrasts of color. Now, and what I'm doing here is creating a little more pink, creating a darker shade of pink. So it's a little too dark, so I add a little more red and clean off my brush here a little bit, grab a little more white, add that there, and now I'm getting closer to the shade that I'm looking for to add to her hairband, just to give it a little more depth. Just a little bit right there, just cutting in, and I'm out. Add that same pink shade to the earrings, a little bit to her lips, and just kind of ties it all together. And this pretty much wraps up our Rose Tyler illustration. This was a lot of fun to do. It's a lot of fun to draw from real life. It's a crazy challenge, but I hope you guys are more encouraged to give it a try and see what you can learn. I appreciate all the support. Thanks for subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you guys again here real soon with more videos. Thanks a lot.